First, let's start with this case. For months, I had to deal with one of the most careless and entitled coworkers imaginable. He had a habit of destroying his own equipment, and somehow that always became someone else's problem. Mainly mine. It started with his first laptop accident. He knocked over a full cup of coffee right onto his keyboard during a meeting. He panicked, tried drying it off with paper towels, but the thing was fried. He had to wait a few days for IT to give him a replacement. Then he did it again. The exact same thing. Coffee, laptop, total destruction. This time, IT was annoyed. They told him he needed to be more careful because they wouldn't keep replacing his devices if he kept damaging them. He laughed it off, acting like it was just bad luck. And then he did it a third time. At this point, IT refused to issue him another laptop immediately. They told him he'd have to wait until they could get approval for a replacement, which could take weeks. That's when he turned to me. He showed up at my desk, acting overly friendly, and asked to borrow my laptop. Just for a little while, he said, until he could get a new one. I immediately said no. I told him that I needed my laptop for my own work, and that his problem wasn't my responsibility. He didn't like that answer. He tried arguing, saying I was being selfish and that sharing is what good coworkers do. I stood my ground. He left in a huff, but I figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. A few days later, I came into the office and immediately knew something was off. My desk had been messed with. My chair was out of place, my keyboard had been moved, and my laptop was sitting at an angle, almost like someone had tried to open it and stopped halfway. I checked my files. Everything was still there, but my gut told me something was wrong. So I set a trap. The next day, before leaving, I took pictures of my desk, the exact position of my laptop, my mouse, everything. Then I left for the night. The following morning I checked. Sure enough, things had been moved again. I reported it to HR immediately. They checked the security cameras, and guess who they saw snooping around my desk after hours? My coworker. They called him in, confronted him with the footage, and he immediately started making excuses. Said he was just looking for something and that he didn't mean any harm. But when they asked why he was touching my laptop, he had no answer. HR didn't buy it. Between his history of carelessness, his entitled attitude, and now this blatant attempt at messing with my workspace, they decided he was too much of a liability. They fired him on the spot for workplace harassment. But it gets better. Because of how reckless and unprofessional he had been, not just with my stuff, but with company equipment in general, word got around fast in our industry. He's now blacklisted. No one wants to hire someone who can't even keep a laptop safe for a week. And I still have my laptop, my job, and zero regrets. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. This guy destroyed 3 laptops, acted like it was everyone else's problem, and then tried to mess with your workspace when you didn't bail him out. He got exactly what he deserved. No one wants an employee who can't be trusted around basic equipment. You're not in the wrong. The second he started touching your stuff without permission, it became workplace harassment. You handled it perfectly. Gathered evidence, reported it, and let HR do their job. Now he's unemployed and blacklisted? Actions have consequences. You're not in the wrong. Let's be real. If HR hadn't stepped in, he would have escalated. People like him don't stop at minor sabotage. He saw you as a convenient target, and if you hadn't caught him, who knows what he would have done next. Good riddance. Next up, when my grandmother passed away, it was heartbreaking. She was the glue that held our family together, and losing her felt like losing a piece of home. I had been very close to her, visiting her regularly, helping her with errands, and making sure she was never lonely. She wasn't just my grandma. She was someone I loved deeply and took care of. My cousin? He couldn't have cared less. For years, he never visited her. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even when she was sick. He always had an excuse. He was too busy or had plans. Meanwhile, he had plenty of time for vacations, parties, and wasting money on expensive things. He never once made an effort to spend time with her. My grandma noticed. She wasn't blind to the fact that one of her grandkids cared for her, while the other one only cared about himself. When she passed, I was devastated. While I was still grieving, I had to handle her estate, go through her things, and deal with legal matters. It was a difficult time, but I wanted to honor her properly. That's when my cousin showed up. He hadn't spoken to her in years, Hadn't been there for a single moment of her later life, but the second she was gone, he suddenly cared. Not about her money. He asked when we were going to split the inheritance. I told him there was nothing to split. She had written him out of the will. He went ballistic. He accused me of manipulating her, claimed I must have forced her to leave everything to me, and demanded I give him his half. That's when he tried to take me to court. He thought he could challenge the will, but my grandma had been very clear in her final wishes. She had left everything to me because I was the one who had been there for her. She had even written a specific note about how she was leaving my cousin out because he had never once made the effort to be in her life. The case was thrown out immediately. He had no claim. Now, he's stuck with nothing while I use the money to pay off my house. And I don't feel bad at all. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. He ignored your grandmother when she was alive but suddenly expected a payout when she passed? That's not how it works. He made it clear he didn't care about her. Why should he benefit from her estate? He got exactly what he deserved. You're not in the wrong. This wasn't some surprise decision. Your grandma knew exactly what she was doing. She saw who actually cared about her and acted accordingly. Your cousin thought he was entitled to free money when he put in zero effort. He played stupid games and won nothing. You're not in the wrong. I love how these people completely disregard their family until there's money involved. Where was he when she needed love and support? Nowhere. He didn't want a grandmother. He wanted a paycheck. Next up, for years I had to listen to my friend mock my career choices. When we were younger, we both had different ideas about success. I went the corporate route, got a stable job with good pay and benefits, and worked my way up. He, on the other hand, was all about following his passions, which in his case meant hopping from one failed startup to another, never sticking to anything for too long. He loved to talk down to me about my job. Anytime we hung out, he'd make snide comments about how I was a corporate sellout who had given up on my dreams. He acted like he was superior because he wasn't part of the machine. Meanwhile, I was paying my bills comfortably, saving for my future, and building a stable life. He was constantly struggling, barely making ends meet, and relying on loans and side gigs just to scrape by. I never rubbed it in. I figured he had made his choices, and as long as he was happy, it wasn't my place to judge. Then, everything fell apart for him. His latest passion project failed miserably, leaving him completely broke and unemployed. Suddenly, the guy who used to sneer at corporate jobs was desperate for one, and guess who he came running to? He begged me to get him a job at my company. At first, I thought he was joking, but no, he was dead serious. He wanted me to pull strings, get him through the hiring process, and vouch for him. I reminded him of all the times he had called me a sellout. I asked, "Why would you want a job at a sellout company?" He got angry. He said I was being petty and holding a grudge over things he had said in the past. He called me a bad friend for not helping him out when he needed it. I told him that real friends don't spend years belittling you and then expect favors when things go south. Now he's still unemployed, bitter, and blaming me for his situation. And honestly, I don't feel bad at all. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. This isn't about holding a grudge. It's about not rewarding someone who belittled you. He only saw value in your job when it could benefit him. That's not friendship. That's entitlement. You're not in the wrong. He thought he was too good for a stable job, and now he's learning the hard way that financial security matters. He insulted you for years, and now he wants you to save him? Nope. Let him deal with the consequences. Everyone sucks. He was a jerk for mocking you, but refusing to help just to spite him seems a little extreme. If he was truly qualified, you could have at least pointed him toward job openings instead of shutting him down completely. Next up, when my ex and I were together, I genuinely believed he was the love of my life. We had been together for 4 years, and I thought we were solid. He was charming, affectionate when he wanted to be, and always made me feel like we had a future. I was so convinced that he was the one that I ignored a lot of red flags. He worked late all the time. His phone was always face down. He was protective over his social media accounts and would get defensive whenever I asked who he was texting. But I trusted him, so I ignored my gut. Then one night I found out the truth. A mutual friend sent me a screenshot of him on a dating app. His profile was active, complete with photos he had taken while we were still together. My heart sank, and I felt like the biggest idiot for not realizing it sooner. I confronted him, and at first, he denied everything. He tried to say it was just a joke, and that his friends had set up the profile for fun. But when I told him I had receipts, including messages he sent to other women, he finally admitted it. Even then, he wasn't sorry. He just sighed and said, "It's not a big deal. It's not like I actually met up with anyone." That was the moment I knew our relationship was over. I dumped him on the spot, cut all contact, and spent the next few months picking up the pieces of my life. It was hard, but I healed. Eventually, I moved on. I didn't think about him again until years later, when I saw something interesting on social media. A mutual friend posted photos from an engagement party. There he was, my ex, smiling with his new fiancée, looking like the perfect, doting partner. At first, I just rolled my eyes and scrolled past. But then I started seeing more posts about their wedding. People were commenting about how excited they were, how beautiful the venue was, and how his fiancée had the most gorgeous engagement ring. I wouldn't have given it another thought until something unexpected happened. A random message popped up in my inbox. It was from someone I didn't know. She said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I used to work at the same company as your ex. I thought you should know. He hasn't changed." Attached were screenshots of his messages. He had been cheating on his new fiancée. Not just emotionally, physically too. There were messages, flirty texts, and even proof of him meeting up with other women. I just sat there, staring at my phone. I had zero obligation to do anything. She wasn't my friend. She wasn't part of my life. But I knew exactly what it felt like to be in her shoes, to trust someone completely, only to find out they were making a fool of you behind your back. I had a choice, ignore it or warn her. I took a deep breath and sent her a message. I kept it short and factual. I told her that I had dated him years ago and that he had cheated on me too. Then I attached all the proof I had been sent. Less than an hour later, she responded. Her message was short but devastating. She said, "Thank you for telling me. I had a feeling something was off, but I didn't want to believe it." Then she blocked him. By the next day, word had spread. Their wedding was officially canceled. She had dumped him immediately. And the best part? She kept the engagement ring. Apparently, it was a very expensive ring. Her family had helped pay for a lot of the wedding costs, and after finding out he had been cheating, they decided she had every right to keep it as compensation for the time, money, and emotional damage he had caused. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. You saved her from marrying a serial cheater. If anything, you did her a favor. She deserved to know before wasting her life on someone who never planned to be faithful. He's only mad because he got caught. You're not in the wrong. People like him never change. The fact that he thought he could cheat his way through another relationship and not get caught is hilarious. Now he's alone and broke, exactly what he deserves. Everyone sucks. Your ex is obviously a terrible person, but it wasn't really your place to get involved. She probably would have figured it out on her own eventually. Exposing him right before their wedding just felt a little vindictive.